You might have heard me say before that entrepreneurship is not for the meek. It can be lonely. You can feel like you're wandering around aimlessly in a forest without a glimmer of hope of getting out. And I always say to people, there is not a more dangerous neighborhood than this one when I am alone at night. So I completely understand that as an entrepreneur or as a temporary employee or a freelancer, you might want to go back to the corporate space. It's something that I did previously. But there is a way to position yourself and your past experience so that your employer sees it as an asset, even if you didn't feel as though you were incredibly successful as an entrepreneur. So let's dive in. Hi, I'm Kristen. I'm a 25-year veteran hiring manager and attorney turned executive career coach. I help mid to senior level corporate women get promoted and transition into work they love. So first and foremost, I've seen this pretty often, but a lot of times when individuals transfer from entrepreneurship or freelancing back into corporate, they're not always sure how to explain it. Yes, you and I, if you're an entrepreneur, know that it can be feast or famine. You can have cycles where you are just rolling in the work, and then there can also be cycles where it just feels like a drought and you're not sure if you'll ever work again. So the feeling of stability, the feeling of camaraderie, the ability to have stable health insurance. These are all things that might drive you back to corporate, and I completely get it. But those are also things that we don't want to really share when we are speaking to a recruiter or a hiring manager. So I want you to really think about, first and foremost, why it is that you want to go back to corporate, and be honest and a little bit vulnerable. And let me explain what I mean by this. When I talk about vulnerability, I'm not talking about, showing up naked and spotlighting yourself, but recruiters and hiring managers hire people that they know, like, and trust. I have said this before, and if you are in marketing, you understand that we buy from brands we know, like, and trust. So you have to become that brand that they're going to buy in a very short period of time. And being a little bit vulnerable about why you are seeking to return to corporate can be one of those things that really get you over the threshold. So I'll use myself as an example. I worked in consulting, doing DEI consulting for a number of years before returning to corporate. And when I went in for the job interview, I was very honest about how lonely it is to be an entrepreneur, where you are coming up with ideas and executing solely by yourself, and you don't really have someone with whom you can riff ideas and see if something is going to turn out, because you're just talking to yourself constantly. I've also had clients that have traveled a lot because they've become speakers professionally, and that can become exhausting. I've had individuals that when they were young, they traveled all the time, and freelancing was the way to go because they could be anywhere in the world and still be working and supporting their lifestyle. But we change and we grow. And when we want to return to the United States, perhaps start a family, there's a way to position the ability to be stable, the ability to have continuity, and how valuable that can be as well. So I want you to think about your why, position it accordingly, and think about what you can share to show a little bit more of yourself than the typical candidate might. Okay, number 2, make sure you consolidate your experience. So I had a client about a year ago who traveled the world. She was a freelancer and she loved every second of it. But there was a point in time where she wanted to return to the US. She had a sick family member and wanted to go back to corporate and have that stability. When we looked at her resume, it was a little bit of too much in the sense that she was listing all of her contract gigs. And if you were a recruiter or a hiring manager, it might be overwhelming. You might make assumptions about this person jumps around a lot and they're not going to be with an organization for a long time. So what we did was we consolidated her experience. We made it her initials and then legal, because she was a lawyer. And then we listed all of the skills and all of the things that she had done and highlighted some of the major clients that she had had. So if you do have big corporate names that you have worked with in the past, you're going to want to highlight this here. It's very different than marketing a client you've worked with on your website. You can put these organizations on your resume. And if you don't have big names, think about the number of clients you've had, the length of time you've worked with them, and think about adding some numbers to the resume to give it some weight. So number 3, you want to describe your impact. I know firsthand that as a consultant, sometimes it can be hard to quantify what you've done, but if you can make an educated guess, what I always recommend to private clients is that you use the word approximately and then make an educated guess. You never want to lie. I cannot say that plainly or enough, but make sure that you're making an educated guess. Use the word approximately to describe the impact of your business. The other thing you definitely want to highlight as well is your soft skills. If you were able to resolve conflict, mediate, negotiate, lead even though you were not in a position of authority, those are all skills that are excruciatingly valuable in a corporate setting. So make sure you include those in some way when you're describing your impact. When describing impact, I want you to answer these questions. Was I able to save a client time? Was I able to save a client money? Was I able to make their life easier or help them achieve more success? So for example, if I was in marketing and I had a client that was suddenly featured in Inc. or Fast Company, that's something that I would highlight there. And then finally, you want to explain any employment gaps on your resume, or be prepared to do so either in your cover letter or when you get to the screening round with the recruiter. Let me talk about how this impacts women. So there's a lot of subconscious bias around being a woman. And when we add on different factors like being Black, Latinx, LGBTQ, the bias increases. And I can only guess as to why you have an employment gap on your resume, but let me talk about one of the largest contributing factors, and that's motherhood. So moms are 79% less likely to be hired than other women, not other candidates, but other women. And the way this was tested and verified was by simply putting PTA on the resume. Not only are you less likely to be hired as a mother, but you will earn less money, on average about $11,000 less. And while there isn't data on the subject of other caregiving responsibilities, such as a family member or an aging parent, I can guess that it's comparable. So explaining an employment gap doesn't mean you need to provide any details other than just simply addressing it. I had some personal circumstances that have now been resolved or changed, and I am ready to rejoin the workforce. That's really all you need to say. But what can also help you is to highlight the qualities that you gained when you left the workforce. So for example, you can say, I had a circumstance where I needed to leave the workforce, but you don't have to say what it is explicitly, is I had the opportunity to grow my skills with X, whether it was budgeting, whether it was organization, finance, patience. Soft skills really matter too. So think about what any gaps gave you, what it allowed you to evaluate in your life, and where it allowed you to grow. And then I want you to spin that so that it benefits a corporate space. If you have ever returned to the workforce after a period of entrepreneurship, freelancing, or a gap in employment, and you have other tips that you'd like to share with our community, I would love to hear them in the comments. And if you found this video helpful, I would love if you would like, share, and subscribe. My goal with this channel is to curate a like-minded, kind, helpful community of corporate individuals so we can navigate this space together. I come out with new videos each week, and until then, take care.